Chosen one, you didn't just walk into this video by accident. You were led here by something divine, something that knows exactly what you've been through, even when others pretended not to see it. Because this message isn't about motivation, it's about revelation. And once you hear what's coming next, you'll understand why heaven kept you hidden until now. They didn't want to kill your body. They wanted to assassinate your spirit. Slowly, publicly, strategically. Their goal was to humiliate you into silence, to break your identity without leaving a single physical mark. This wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just drama. This was a ritual. And while you were questioning everything, they were watching to see if you'd collapse. But you didn't. You're still here. And what you're about to hear will explain why. Before we go deeper, take a moment. If your spirit is already resonating with what's being revealed, drop a 777 in the comments. It's not just a number, it's a signal to heaven that you see clearly now. And to everyone who's sown into this ministry through super thanks, thank you with all my heart. You're not just supporting a channel, you're making it possible for the truth to reach others who are still stuck in silence. Your giving is part of a spiritual rescue mission, and we are grateful. Now, listen closely. What happened to you wasn't random. It wasn't a bad season. It wasn't just toxic people acting up. No, this was coordinated, calculated, camouflaged in fake kindness and concern. It was spiritual warfare with a smile, an attempt to erase your identity while making you look like the unstable one. And here's the part most people can't stomach. In secret societies, occult systems, and even among false believers, public humiliation is one of the oldest forms of ritual abuse. They don't need to hurt your body. All they need is for you to bleed internally while smiling on the outside. You weren't simply betrayed, you were offered. Not as a guest, but as a sacrifice. But here's what they never expected. They thought you'd break, that you'd lash out, that you'd self-destruct. But instead, you watched, you discerned. You studied the game while they mistook your stillness for weakness. You read their scripts before they even performed. And while they tried to shame you, you became sharply aware of who they really were. You didn't destroy them. You exposed them without ever saying a word. And let's be real, if your life were a Netflix series, that humiliation ritual would have been the shocking season finale. But here's the plot twist. They didn't cancel the show. You did. And now the next season is streaming without the snakes in the cast. So now, I invite you to go deeper with me. Because this video isn't just a reflection of what you endured. It's an unveiling of the spiritual systems that needed your downfall. We're about to break down why your clarity terrified them, why your silence was never weakness, and how your survival wasn't luck, it was strategy. What if the very pain that tried to bury you was actually a crown being forged in secret? What if your survival was the proof that heaven has been defending you behind the scenes the entire time? Stay close, because after today, they won't be able to gaslight you back into spiritual slavery ever again. Let's begin. God's chosen ones, you survived a humiliation ritual, and your discernment saved your life. They didn't come after you because you were weak. They came after you because you were too clean for their dirty games. The purity of your spirit was disruptive in rooms where corruption had become the atmosphere. You didn't play their game, not because you were naive, but because your soul simply couldn't afford the cost of compromise. But let's be honest, have you ever wondered why your goodness provoked such aggression? Why your kindness seemed to awaken hostility instead of harmony? It's because you weren't just different. You were disruptive to the darkness they had become comfortable in. The Bible says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." John 1:5. That light, your light, shone too brightly in places where secrets were currency. And like cockroaches scattering when the lights are turned on, they reacted, not to you, but to what you revealed in them. You didn't call them out, your life did. You were a silent threat, and that's the most dangerous kind. You didn't walk into those rooms seeking control. You brought truth without even trying, and that's what terrified them. They didn't want to fight you. They wanted to contaminate you. If they could smear your name, distort your story, make you second-guess your own memory, they could reduce your spiritual authority without ever laying a hand on you. But can influence be real if it's built on lies? Can a smear undo what God has sealed? Think about Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers, not because he was prideful, but because he dreamed. His vision exposed their insecurity. And what did they do? They threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery, then faked his death. But God never lost sight of him. And in Genesis 50:20, Joseph would later say, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." That's your story too. What they meant to destroy you has only redirected you. Let me tell you about Chadwick Boseman, the late actor best known for playing Black Panther. What many didn't know until after his death was that while he was filming, he was secretly battling cancer. Yet he walked with dignity, purpose, and quiet strength. And while some mocked his weight loss, unaware of the pain he carried, he never retaliated. He remained focused. Why? Because he knew his purpose was greater than their perception. How many times have you been misunderstood in silence, attacked by those who had no idea what you were enduring? And still, your discernment held you up. What they didn't realize was that your intuition wasn't paranoia. It was prophetic insight. You weren't just catching vibes, you were catching patterns. While they smiled in public, you saw the twitch in their spirit. While they spoke blessings, you discerned the curse hidden behind their compliments. And here's the thing, they thought your silence meant defeat. But silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy. Jesus himself remained silent before his accusers, not because he lacked a defense, but because he was the truth. Could it be that your quietness wasn't weakness but wisdom? I'll tell you a story. There was a woman named Leora. Just a few months ago, she was publicly embarrassed in front of her church community after false rumors were spread about her. People she had prayed for now avoided her. But instead of defending herself, she fasted, she prayed, she wept in secret. And then one Sunday, the very person who spread the lie came forward and confessed. Leora had said nothing, but God had said everything. That's the kind of strength you carry. Unshakable, unexplainable, unapologetic. But here's a question that still lingers in the spirit. If they couldn't destroy your reputation, what makes them think they could still break your spirit? No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. Isaiah 54:17. Your survival wasn't passive. You didn't just endure, you discerned, you observed, you awakened. You no longer beg for loyalty. You recognize counterfeit love the moment it enters the room. That's power. That's spiritual intelligence. That's divine training. And now you're not afraid to walk alone. Because solitude in the presence of God is more powerful than popularity in the presence of fakes. Like a lighthouse in the storm, you were built to shine, not just for yourself, but for others, silently watching, hoping you don't give up. Can you feel how many are drawing courage just by seeing you stand? They tried to stain your identity, but all they did was reveal your calling. You thought it was rejection, didn't you? The silence, the cold shoulders, the awkward exits from people who once clung tightly to your presence. It felt like abandonment. But what if it wasn't rejection at all? What if it was revelation? What if what you called exile was actually an X-ray from heaven, exposing not just others, but parts of you that could no longer remain hidden? You weren't being cast out. You were being scanned. Your heart, your relationships, your inner beliefs, even the wounds you thought you'd buried years ago. Everything was being spiritually examined. God wasn't pushing you away. He was pulling you through a diagnostic process, and like a surgeon before the operation, he had to assess the damage before bringing healing. Just like Job, who didn't understand why everything he loved was being stripped away, you too were being divinely examined. In Job 23:10 he said, "But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold." You too were in a refining fire, not to destroy you, but to reveal what was eternal within you. What if all those painful goodbyes were really God's way of saying, "This can't go with you, where I'm taking you"? The humiliation wasn't random, it was sacred. Every mocking voice, every table you were no longer invited to, every friend who stopped calling, it hurt, yes, but it also healed. Because those moments forced you to confront the truth. You were surrounded not by allies but by assignments, and their season in your life had expired. Think of it like a snake shedding its skin. The process is raw, vulnerable, even violent, but if the snake doesn't shed, it dies. You were outgrowing spaces that felt familiar. And sometimes growth doesn't look like wings sprouting. It looks like people walking away without warning. One woman who knew this all too well was Maya Angelou, the iconic poet and civil rights voice. She once said, "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." In her early career, she trusted people who smiled publicly, but wounded privately. Over time, she realized their actions weren't betrayals, they were revelations. And when she accepted that, her power multiplied. Like you, she stopped apologizing for her insight. But let's bring this even closer. Let me tell you about Emmanuel, a school teacher who poured his soul into his students. One year, the administration turned against him, claiming he was too intense, too spiritual, and too principled. He lost his position. The humiliation was sharp, but just months later, an international program offered him a role designing curriculum for underserved schools across 4 countries. The rejection wasn't exile, it was a divine reroute. You see, your discernment began sharpening, not despite the chaos, but because of it. You started noticing patterns, the way some people only celebrated you when you were small, the way your success was met with silence, and your vulnerability used as ammunition. You didn't become paranoid, you became perceptive. The Bible says in Proverbs 4:7, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting get understanding." And that's what you were truly gaining in the fire. Not applause, not company, but understanding. And understanding is what separates the chosen from the crowd. Remember those coincidences, the sudden distance, the smear campaigns that seemed to erupt out of nowhere. They weren't coincidences, they were coordinated spiritual purges. When God starts revealing, he doesn't whisper. Sometimes he exposes in broad daylight what you kept protecting in your heart. And that's why it had to be loud. That's why it had to be messy. That's why it couldn't be sugar-coated. Because if it were gentle, you would have made excuses for them again. Does it still feel like loss? Or are you beginning to see that what was removed wasn't love? It was illusion, that what you thought were missed opportunities were actually distractions in disguise. You didn't lose anything real. You lost the fog that kept you confused. You lost the leeches draining your peace. And in their place, you gained something rare, clarity. You began to see fake smiles from the door. You stopped needing a second betrayal to trust your gut. You stopped giving second chances to patterns that never changed. And most importantly, you gained self-respect, not the cheap kind that demands attention, but the kind that walks away in silence, trusting that God will vindicate the misunderstood. The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. Psalm 118, verse 22. That verse wasn't just about Christ, it's also about you, the one they rejected, the one they mocked, the one they said was too much or too deep. And yet, here you are, still standing, stronger, cleaner, sharper. You weren't being rejected, you were being revealed to yourself. You were being purified in public so that you would never again tolerate in private what God already showed you was poison. So don't call it exile, call it extraction, because God wasn't just pulling you out of their presence. He was pulling out everything in you that was willing to settle for half love, half truth, and half purpose. And now you're clean. Where you're going, only the real can follow. And every counterfeit had to be flushed out, painfully, publicly, and permanently. They didn't want to kill you. Death would have been too loud, too obvious, too final. What they truly desired was more sinister, your silence. They wanted you alive but uncertain, breathing but doubting, walking but spiritually paralyzed. The real plan wasn't to destroy your body, it was to dissolve your confidence, disorient your discernment, and disconnect you from the voice of God that lives inside you. Can you see it now? This was never about elimination. It was about containment. They wanted you stuck in limbo, questioning every decision, apologizing for your strength, editing your words before you even spoke. Why? Because as long as you were unsure of yourself, they could keep steering your life. As long as you tiptoed, they had room to dominate. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. John 10:10. That verse isn't just about eternal salvation. It's also about spiritual vitality right now. The enemy wasn't after your body. He was after your fullness. The smile on your face with no peace in your heart. The light in your eyes dimming while you keep pretending you're fine. There's a difference between being destroyed and being drained. Some enemies want to crush you openly, but the more dangerous ones, they come gently, with smiles and soft words. They study your light, then slowly teach you to believe it's too bright. You've probably met them, the ones who say you're just too intense when your passion threatens their comfort, or you're so sensitive when your spirit discerns their manipulation. It's not always said with malice, it's said with design. Their compliments came with subtle poison, their laughter masked sharp observations, and the longer they stayed around, the more you began to shrink, not because you lost yourself, but because you were told you were too much for too long. Let me tell you about a man named Elian, a quiet counselor in a broken school system. He noticed things no one else did, students on the brink, teachers hiding burnout, administration gaslighting their own staff. But every time he tried to speak up, they said he was overreacting, misjudging, or causing unnecessary waves. He didn't yell, he didn't push back. He started second-guessing himself. Until one day, during a parent meeting, a student broke down and said, "He's the only one who saw me." That moment snapped him out of it. Elian realized he was never the problem. He was the mirror in a room full of people hiding from their reflection. Can you remember the moment your spirit first began to doubt itself? The moment you lowered your voice, not out of humility, but because you were being conditioned to believe your presence was too much. That's not peace. That's programming. Even in the Bible, we see this subtle war of containment. Look at Nehemiah, rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. His enemies, Sanballat and Tobiah, didn't try to kill him at first. They tried to distract him, delay him, discredit him. They sent letters, invited him to fake meetings, spread lies. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. Nehemiah 6:9. But Nehemiah prayed, "Now strengthen my hands." That's exactly what happened to you. You were surrounded by people who didn't want to end you. They wanted to confuse you so you'd quit your mission, so you'd stay small. Now consider this. What if what you thought was humility, staying quiet, shrinking back, doubting yourself, was actually slow spiritual paralysis? You weren't meant to walk like a shadow in your own story. One public figure who endured this quietly was Princess Diana. She was never hated outright. No, it was much subtler. Constant criticism about her emotions, her behavior, her expressions of compassion. Over time, they tried to make her feel unstable, dramatic, unsafe in her own truth. And yet, in one famous interview, when asked about all the pressure, she simply said, "I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts." She chose authenticity over image, and it cost her a crown, but gave her back her voice. That's what they never saw coming with you. They thought if they humiliated you slowly enough, you'd internalize the shame. They thought if they drained you carefully, you'd never notice the leak. They thought if they kept you confused, you'd self-sabotage, and they wouldn't have to lift a finger. But what they didn't count on was your discernment, that divine alarm in your spirit, that sharp turn in your heart that whispered, "This isn't love, this isn't truth, this isn't God." And you didn't need a dramatic moment to act. You didn't explode. You evolved. You stepped back not out of fear, but out of clarity. You began to notice the patterns, the way you felt small around certain people, the way your spirit tightened in rooms where your soul used to dance. You started protecting yourself, not with walls, but with wisdom. You remembered who you were, and now they're unsettled, because the one thing they feared most has happened. You're still here, and now you see everything. Their manipulation, their tactics, their weakness masked as charm. And the most powerful part? You're not even bitter, you're just done. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. You've reclaimed your sound mind, your voice, your clarity. You're no longer doubting your gift, you're guarding it. You're no longer shrinking to fit their comfort, you're expanding to fulfill your calling. They didn't want you dead, but they failed to realize that a chosen one awakened is more dangerous than one defeated. And now that you've remembered who you are, there's no going back. They didn't just try to humiliate you, they pulled the fire alarm on a hidden system that had existed long before you even stepped into the room. The moment they launched their attack on you in public, something much deeper was revealed. This wasn't just personal hate or misunderstanding. It was an entire underworld of control that had stayed hidden in plain sight, masked behind smiles, religious rituals, and social norms. And you, without even raising your voice, set the whole thing ablaze. At first, the shift was subtle. People you had never confided in suddenly acted like they knew you. Strangers began treating you like a threat. Conversations paused when you walked by. Smiles became sharp. Silence became loud, and energy shifted the moment you stepped into a room. For a while, you questioned your own reality, but eventually the fog cleared, and what you saw was stunning. You hadn't just been betrayed by a person. You had disrupted an unspoken alliance, a spiritual cartel, a secret cult of control, bound together not by love or truth, but by fear, dysfunction, and the silent agreement to never confront what was broken. The Bible warns in Ephesians 6:12, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world." What you encountered wasn't just gossip, it was a demonic system dressed up as friendship, family, even church. And the moment you stopped shrinking to fit their narrative, everything changed. You didn't even have to confront them. Your mere decision to move differently, to stop oversharing, to protect your peace, to ask questions no one dared ask, was enough to shake their foundation. They weren't afraid of what you did. They were terrified of what you saw. Think of Jesus entering the temple in Matthew 21. The place had become a marketplace, a den of thieves, hiding behind the guise of worship. But when he overturned the tables, it wasn't the chaos he caused that shook the leaders. It was the truth he exposed. Could it be that your presence had the same effect? Now consider this. Why would people who claim neutrality be so invested in your destruction? Why would those who said, "I'm not involved," spend hours feeding the flame in private? That's not coincidence. That's coordination. When people act like a unit but pretend they're strangers, you're not dealing with individuals, you're dealing with a system. Even the late Pope Benedict XVI once said, "The greatest persecution of the Church comes not from enemies on the outside, but arises from sin within the Church." Sometimes the betrayal doesn't come from obvious outsiders. It comes from those who sat beside you, worshipped with you, broke bread with you. Let me tell you a story. Just last year, a youth pastor named Damien began noticing subtle shifts in his ministry team. Volunteers withdrew. Meetings happened without him. Eventually, false accusations were spread, and he was gracefully asked to step down. But something didn't add up. In prayer, he began discerning the truth. There had been an inner circle, a hidden alliance working for years to control finances, filter influence, and maintain a certain image of the church. His removal had nothing to do with failure and everything to do with exposure. His discernment had set off an alarm, and instead of repenting, they retaliated. That's what happened to you. You didn't even know how loud your presence was until they tried to silence it. And here's the twist. The humiliation they planned for you ended up being a spotlight on their own dysfunction. It revealed the whispers behind the scenes, the prayers that were really gossip, the handshakes that came with daggers. The more they tried to isolate you, the more they exposed themselves. And you saw clearly not just who stood against you, but who stood by and watched. Do you remember who said nothing when you were being torn apart? Do you remember the silence that screamed louder than any insult? Like a fault line beneath the surface, the ground was always unstable. They just didn't think you'd notice. But your discernment didn't come from intuition alone. It was sharpened in the wilderness, through trials, through prayer, through spiritual warfare. You became a mirror they couldn't escape. And when people don't want to confront their own reflection, they break the mirror instead. Even nature echoes this. Imagine a still lake reflecting the sky above. The moment someone throws a stone, the water ripples and the reflection disappears. That's what they tried to do. But what they didn't realize is that the water always returns to clarity. You're not shattered, you're resurfacing. The ritual of humiliation was their ancient playbook, a tactic as old as Cain and Abel, when jealousy turns to murder, not because the innocent did wrong, but because their righteousness revealed the wickedness of others. You didn't just survive the ritual, you decoded it. You traced every move, every mask, every alliance, and now the truth stands fully visible. They weren't random people. They were parts of a machine, a system that feeds off silence, secrets, and control. And you broke it, not with revenge, but with revelation. And now the question is no longer, why did they do this to me? But rather, what will God do with what they exposed? Discernment was never just a character trait for you. It's been your lifeline. For God's chosen ones, discernment isn't optional. It's your weapon, your early warning system, your divine radar pulsing beneath the surface, while others are still fixated on what's visible. You don't carry discernment like an accessory. You live by it. Without it, you'd have walked straight into traps wrapped in flattery, into agreements disguised as blessings, and into circles that were never meant to include you, only consume you. Others speak of intuition like it's a gentle breeze, something to notice or ignore. But for you, it doesn't whisper. It crashes into your chest like a sudden thunderclap before a storm. Have you ever felt your spirit recoil in a room before anyone said a word? That wasn't paranoia. That was divine protection sounding an alarm your soul couldn't afford to ignore. King Solomon, often praised as the wisest man in the Bible, asked God not for riches or revenge, but for a discerning heart. In 1 Kings 3:9 he prayed, "Give your servant therefore an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil." That's the difference between those who seek comfort and those who are called. You didn't ask for ease. You asked for eyes that see beyond the surface, and you got them. But discernment comes at a price. People misunderstood your silence. They mocked your instinct. They labeled you suspicious, too guarded, or even judgmental, because they've never had to sit at a table where betrayal wore perfume and offered hugs. They've never had to smile through dinner while sensing their name had already been placed on an altar hours before they arrived. You have. And that's why you move differently now. Let me tell you about a man named Elias. He was a well-respected creative director who had just been offered a major project with a glamorous team and international backing. Everything looked perfect, except for a tightness he felt in his chest every time he spoke with the executive board. The numbers made sense. The offer was generous, but his spirit screamed no. He walked away. Months later, the company collapsed in a scandal that implicated everyone involved. Except Elias, because he trusted the alarm before he saw the smoke. How many times have you been spared not by evidence, but by that invisible pull in your chest? That vibration in the atmosphere that shifts just slightly when deception walks in. Even Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, moved with discernment. In Luke 5:22, it says, Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, "Why are you thinking these things in your hearts?" Before words were spoken, he read the room. So do you. That gift you carry. It's not suspicion, it's spiritual accuracy. And still, people tried to convince you it was just overthinking. But when your spirit said leave, you didn't wait for confirmation. You didn't beg for clarity. You moved. You've left conversations mid-sentence, turned down invitations with no explanation, stepped away from relationships that made sense on paper, but were suffocating your soul. And each time you did, you escaped what others walked straight into. Imagine a deer in the forest. The air is still, no sound of danger, but the deer freezes, not because it sees the hunter, but because it feels the shift in the wind. It runs, not because of proof, but because of instinct. That's you. And that's how you've survived setups designed to trap you emotionally, financially, spiritually. Let's pause for a moment. Do you remember that time, perhaps years ago, when everything looked right, everyone supported a decision, and still you hesitated? What if you hadn't? Discernment saved you from deals that were dressed up as destiny but built on deception. It kept you from friendships that praised you in public and plotted in private. It protected you from environments that looked like platforms but were actually prisons. You didn't have to see the receipts. Your spirit held the pattern. You noticed the long pause before they answered, the slight shift in tone, the way they said, "I support you," but their energy shrank when you succeeded. You noticed the coldness behind the kindness, the questions that felt more like traps than curiosity. You didn't just feel energy, you read it, decoded it, and responded before the threat became visible. And that's why the humiliation they planned didn't destroy you. It revealed something you already knew in your spirit. It was confirmation, not condemnation. You weren't crazy. You weren't overreacting. You were right, all along. Let's not forget Maya Angelou, the legendary poet and civil rights activist. She once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." But you didn't even need them to show it. You felt it. And that's why you don't chase clarity from chaos anymore. Now, you no longer guess. You just know. You don't need to confront. You don't need to argue. You don't even need closure. You just exit, quietly, strategically, and alive. because being chosen means walking with a knowing that doesn't always need to be explained. And those who understand don't need an explanation. Those who don't, you've learned not to invite them into rooms your spirit is trying to leave. They didn't test you to understand you. They tested you to see if you could be broken. But why would they do that to someone who came in peace? Why aim their arrows at someone who never raised a sword? Because your presence alone was a confrontation. You didn't come to expose them, yet everything about you did. Like pure light entering a dusty room, your presence revealed every hidden speck without a word. You walked in with no performance, no script, just truth wrapped in silence. And that silence, it was deafening. It shook the foundations of the false kingdoms they built inside themselves. For the Word of God is alive and active. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Hebrews 4:12. That same power lived in your walk. You weren't reading from a scroll, you were becoming the scroll. Have you noticed how a butterfly never apologizes for its wings, yet even its beauty can unsettle the caterpillars that never believed transformation was possible? That's what your growth did to them. You were proof that someone can be deeply wounded and still choose mercy. You proved that healing isn't weakness, and that gentleness isn't a lack of strength, but the evidence of divine restraint. Let me ask you something quietly. Could it be that the very reason they labeled you too much was because you reminded them of what they had buried inside themselves? Have you ever seen someone stare too long into a mirror, only to flinch? That's how they looked at you. You didn't attack their lies, you simply refused to live one. David in the Psalms once cried out, "They repay me evil for good and hatred for my friendship." Psalm 109 verse 5. That same spirit followed you. They mistook your kindness for weakness, your grace for guilt, and your silence for surrender. But heaven was watching. You weren't suffering in vain, you were being shaped. Let me tell you about Marielle, a sculptor known in Europe for her life-size works in marble. She once said, "The stone resists me most just before it reveals its beauty." Your resistance too was misread. When you didn't crumble, they called you proud. When you didn't scream, they said you had no fire. When you kept your peace, they accused you of having no fight. But you were fighting all along, just not their way. Even Christ was misunderstood. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, Isaiah 53:7. You carried that same quiet power. And for those who survive by noise, manipulation, and spectacle, your stillness was disturbing. They wanted you to react, to shatter, to retaliate. But you didn't. You stayed grounded. You stayed holy. Can we pause here for a moment? What kind of person refuses to play the game, even when the rules are stacked against them? Someone who has seen the throne room. Someone who has tasted eternity. Someone like you. I once met a man named Jonah, not the prophet, but a janitor in a failing high school. He was invisible to most, but I noticed something strange. Every troubled kid found their way to his storage closet just to talk. He never preached, never corrected, only listened. Later I learned many of those same students turned their lives around. One of them, now a professor, said, "Jonah never saved me with words. He saved me by seeing me when no one else did." You've done the same. Just by showing up with spiritual vision, you've disturbed hell's plan. They had to test your light, not because it was weak, but because it threatened to expose the illusion they'd built their lives on. And when it didn't flicker, when you kept glowing even in the fire, they knew. You couldn't be converted, controlled, or corrupted. You were dangerous not because you had weapons, but because you had clarity. Even in Scripture, those who carried heaven's clarity were hunted. Joseph was betrayed, Jeremiah thrown in a pit, Paul beaten and imprisoned. And yet, not one of them stopped shining. You too are part of that lineage. That's why their labels, too emotional, too spiritual, too intense, never truly fit you. You weren't too much, you were just too true. Think of a river that never bends to fit the rocks. It carves its way over time with patience. That's what your presence does. It doesn't conform, it reshapes, and they couldn't stand that. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10. You didn't just survive a ritual of humiliation, you overcame it without becoming what they accused you of being. You walked through the fire and didn't come out bitter. You came out brighter. And in a world that rewards fake over faith, that kind of glow is terrifying to darkness. So why did they treat you like the enemy? Not because you were evil, but because you were incorruptible. And nothing threatens deception more than a soul that cannot be twisted. They started with whispers, gentle manipulations, small omissions, intentional forgetfulness that they hoped you wouldn't notice. They wanted to confuse you subtly, behind closed doors, where no one could see the wound but you. It was safer that way. For them. If they could twist the narrative quietly, if they could make you doubt your own worth just enough, maybe you'd destroy yourself without their fingerprints on the crime. But you noticed. Even in silence, your spirit sensed it. The atmosphere shifted. The tension behind the smiles became louder than their words. And though it wasn't clear at first, your discernment, the gift God placed within you, began to expose the scheme. Have you ever watched a fog lift just enough to reveal the outline of a mountain? That's how the truth started revealing itself to you. For nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be known and come abroad. Luke 8:17. When their quiet sabotage failed, when you didn't collapse from confusion or isolation, they panicked. Private control depends on one thing, your blindness. But you didn't stay blind. You began walking in wisdom. And as soon as you shifted, they shifted too. Suddenly the games became louder, the accusations became bolder. They moved the attack to the public stage. What kind of fear drives someone to turn your life into a performance, into a circus of distortion? It wasn't just about harming your name, it was about silencing your presence. When lies whispered in private couldn't stop you, they brought in the crowd. They exaggerated your flaws, dragged your past into present conversations, and spun narratives designed to humiliate you in front of anyone who once held respect for you. They were no longer trying to make you doubt yourself. They wanted everyone else to doubt you too. This isn't new. When Jesus was brought before the crowd, falsely accused and mocked with a crown of thorns, it wasn't justice they sought, it was spectacle. They all cried out, "Crucify him." Mark 15:13. The goal wasn't truth, it was volume. Just like you, he stood silent, letting the noise condemn itself. And like him, you didn't fight back with chaos. You let your peace speak louder than their outrage. I once heard the story of Rafiq, a young non-profit leader falsely accused of fraud by his jealous colleagues. They couldn't find evidence, so they created a narrative loud enough to scare away donors. His name trended in local news, painted with shame. But instead of defending himself, he quietly kept working. 6 months later, the truth unraveled when one of his accusers confessed. Today, that same non-profit is recognized internationally. Why? Because the storm ended, but his integrity remained. You too were placed on a stage not of your choosing, but instead of shrinking in shame, you endured with silent strength. And over time, people began to notice. Have you ever watched how a tree remains unmoved during a storm, even as everything else bends or breaks? That's what your soul did. You stayed rooted. As your attackers became louder and more theatrical, the truth began to whisper to the hearts of those watching. Why are they so obsessed with someone who isn't even responding? Why invest so much energy into destroying a person who's not fighting back? Those questions were seeds, and they began to grow. The Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Exodus 14:14. That's exactly what you did. You didn't match their energy. You didn't beg for understanding. You let God vindicate you while you stayed in position. Let me tell you about Celeste, a teacher who was demoted after standing up for underprivileged students. Her peers turned against her, fabricating accusations. She became the topic of every staff meeting, every parent rumor. But she never retaliated. She kept loving the students, kept showing up early, kept doing the work. 3 years later, she was invited back as principal. The same mouths that gossiped about her were now silent in awe. That's the power of endurance. And we see this not just in quiet lives, but even on the world stage. Take Malala Yousafzai, the young education activist from Pakistan who was shot in the head by the Taliban simply for speaking up for girls' right to learn. They tried to silence her through violence, but instead her voice grew louder. She didn't retaliate in rage. She responded with courage. Today, she's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and her story has inspired millions. Like you, she proved that surviving the spectacle with grace is more powerful than shouting back. What they failed to realize is this: when humiliation becomes performance, people start to see the actors more clearly than the target. And the more dramatic their performance became, the more transparent their insecurity appeared. Eventually, the spotlight they used to shame you revealed the real truth. It wasn't about you at all. It was about their loss of control. They thought they were writing your ending, but they were only highlighting their own fear. You meant to harm me, but God intended it for good. Genesis 50:20. That scripture has never been more alive in your story. What was meant to shame you elevated you. What was designed to isolate you clarified your purpose. What was built to destroy you revealed how unshakable your foundation really is. You didn't just survive the spectacle, you outlasted it. You walked through the fire and came out without the smell of smoke. And now, the world doesn't just see your scars, they see your soul. And more importantly, they see who never let go of you through it all. You proved that you were never the problem. You were the evidence that manipulation lost its power. They didn't just try to shame you, they tried to break you from the inside out. What they wanted wasn't a public embarrassment, it was private collapse. They hoped your own mind would become your prison, that even in silence, the echo of their words would torment you more than any crowd ever could. It was never just about discrediting you in the eyes of others. It was about making you turn on yourself. And still, you survived. But let's be clear, it wasn't survival in the typical sense. You weren't simply holding your breath underwater, waiting for rescue. You were being thrown into emotional oceans deeper than anything you'd known before. You were expected to sink. And maybe for a moment you did. Maybe you doubted. Maybe you cried when no one saw. But then something unexplainable began to happen. You didn't die under the weight. You adapted. You learned to breathe beneath the surface of emotional suffocation. That's the miracle. You began to grow spiritual gills. How is it possible that someone surrounded by lies, manipulation, and guilt can come out wiser instead of bitter? When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. Isaiah 43:2. That promise wasn't just poetic, it became your reality. While they designed shame as a form of drowning, God used it as your training ground. Have you ever watched a lotus flower bloom in murky water? It doesn't wait for purity to rise. It transforms the filth into its foundation. That's what you did. You took the shame they weaponized and turned it into strategy. The more they tried to twist your truth, the more you untangled yourself from their lies. They didn't expect you to stop arguing. They didn't expect you to go silent. But silence is where you evolved. In that stillness, your mind didn't collapse. It recalibrated. Your emotional intelligence rose to new heights. You began to see patterns in people, spiritual warfare behind passive aggression, and the psychology behind their tactics. You weren't just reacting anymore, you were perceiving. Let me ask you this. Could it be that the very thing they used to destroy you became the very tool God used to develop you? Take the example of Nelson Mandela, one of the most resilient leaders of our time. Before he became the president of South Africa, he spent 27 years in prison under a system designed to crush his dignity. Solitary confinement, silence, psychological torment. But he later said, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Like you, he didn't escape shame. He transmuted it into wisdom. When he walked out of that prison, he wasn't the same man. He had learned to breathe where others would suffocate. And just like Mandela, you've begun to decode the manipulation. You no longer waste energy explaining yourself to those who decided long ago to misunderstand you. You recognize the gaslighting. You see how guilt is used like a leash. And instead of wrestling with it, you step back and see clearly. I'll tell you a story. There was once a young woman named Eden, a classically trained pianist who became the scapegoat of a professional orchestra after she refused to play politics. They began to sabotage her performances, whisper false rumors, and rewrite her story in silence. It nearly ruined her spirit. But instead of quitting, she learned to rehearse at midnight when no one was watching. She started composing her own music. A year later, she performed her first original piece in front of the same critics who tried to crush her. This time, they stood in silence, not from admiration, but awe, because she had learned to sing in the dark. That's what you've done. You've stopped depending on air from others. You found your oxygen source within. You trained your soul to swim in waters that once terrified you. The current no longer confuses you. You've learned how to read it. But we glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. Romans 5:3-4. That's the formula God used on you. They thought they were burying you in shame, but they were planting you deeper in divine growth. Now, when someone stirs drama or throws emotional daggers, they don't realize you've already lived in storms far greater. They think their manipulation is new to you, but you've memorized the tactics. You can feel the tension in a room before a word is spoken. You can sense false intentions like a radar, not because you're paranoid, but because you've been trained. You no longer panic when the waters rise. You've mastered the deep. You are no longer afraid of drowning, because what once drowned you now empowers you. You aren't just someone who endured trauma. You are someone who metabolized it, who turned poison into power, who learned how to think clearly while others were gasping for control. You didn't escape the deep. You became the deep. They dressed it in words meant to warm your heart. Love, loyalty, family. They spoke those words with smiles, soft tones, and familiar rhythms that lulled your defenses to sleep. And why wouldn't you believe them? Every soul longs to feel safe in the arms of those they call home. But beneath that comfort was a carefully scripted deception. It wasn't love, it was a performance. It wasn't loyalty, it was manipulation. And it wasn't family, it was a system designed to bind, limit, and consume you, little by little. You didn't see it at first because your heart was open. Like a child holding out their hands to be embraced, you trusted the names they gave to what they did. We only want the best for you. This is what real families do. Words like these felt like blankets, but over time you began to feel cold under them. What once sounded like concern began to sound like control. What once felt like help started to feel like a leash. Have you ever seen a flower that's been placed in a small pot? It might survive, but it will never thrive. That was you. They called it protection. But what they were really doing was pruning you into something small enough to manage. You started to feel it in your spirit long before your mind caught up. That deep, holy intuition that can't be taught. Discernment. It stirred in you like an alarm in the night. You tried to silence it at first. You told yourself you were being ungrateful or imagining things. But the pattern didn't lie. Every gift had strings, every hug hid a blade, and every "I love you" came with a price tag on your freedom. Jesus warned us in Matthew 10:36, "A man's enemies will be the members of his own household." That verse used to sound extreme until you lived it, until you saw that those closest to you weren't cheering you on. They were quietly preparing your sacrifice. Not a dramatic one-time betrayal, but a slow, methodical draining of your spirit, hidden behind rituals of obligation, guilt, and religious tradition. They didn't want you dead. They wanted you small, quiet, predictable, controlled. Let me tell you about Marcus, a gifted musician from a small town who once said yes to every request from his family. Weddings, church events, late-night calls. They told him it was love, that he was their blessing. But the moment he wanted to leave for a conservatory in Europe, they told him he was selfish, ungrateful, disloyal. Years later, when he finally left, he wept. Not because he was leaving family, but because he finally saw they only celebrated his gift as long as it served their comfort. That's the kind of love they offered you, one that clapped when you performed, but vanished when you tried to grow. And isn't that the most dangerous kind of trap? One that wears a smile, one that blesses you in public but curses you in private. How many times did they call your strength rebellion? How often did they dress their fear of your independence as concern for your well-being? You started seeing it clearly. The cage was painted with pretty words, but it was still a cage. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 11:14, "Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light." That's exactly how the ritual was hidden. It was masked in culture, in obligation, in "that's just how we do things." But underneath it all, it was a slow sacrifice, offering your joy, your calling, your peace, on the altar of their control. I once knew a woman named Isola who grew up in a religious household that constantly told her she was too loud, too ambitious, too emotional. They cloaked it in scripture, quoting, "A woman should be quiet and submissive without context." But when she finally left, pursued her education, and became a counselor for women recovering from religious abuse, she realized her voice was never the problem. It was their fear of her power that made them try to silence her. You've experienced that too, the kind of love that only supports you when you're tame. The truth was bitter, wasn't it? When your eyes opened, it felt like the ground cracked under your feet. You questioned everything. Was it ever real? Was I ever truly loved? But even as the illusion crumbled, something deeper awakened in you. Freedom. Because once you saw it for what it was, you could no longer be manipulated by its mask. You stopped mistaking guilt for love. You stopped handing over your power under the name of peace. And you started walking away, not broken but awake. Your discernment, that holy radar from heaven, saved you. Just like Samuel discerned that God was speaking when no one else understood the sound, you too picked up the frequency no one else acknowledged. You walked through the ritual and survived what was meant to kill your spirit. That knife, though unseen, was real. It aimed for your voice, your courage, your calling, but it didn't succeed. And now, you live, fiercely, freely, truthfully. You no longer need their approval because you've been affirmed by the Spirit. You no longer shrink to fit their comfort because you've been expanded by divine purpose. In a world that teaches compromise in the name of connection, you chose clarity in the name of truth. And that choice, though costly, was sacred. You were never their enemy, but your presence, calm, clear, and unapologetically pure, functioned like a mirror they never consented to look into. And that mirror didn't just reflect your light, it exposed their shadows. They had spent years, some even entire lifetimes, constructing personas to avoid those shadows. They buried their shame under busy schedules, their guilt under religious performance, and their pain beneath surface-level pleasantries. And then, You walked in, authentic, simple, still, and without even trying, you shattered the illusion they had worked so hard to maintain. You didn't confront them with harsh words. You didn't accuse them publicly. You simply lived from a place of truth, and that alone made you disruptive. How can stillness be so loud? Because it echoes in every place where someone else is pretending. Your purity wasn't just a difference in personality, it was a reflection of everything they had refused to face within themselves. The Bible says in John 15:22, "If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sin, but now they have no excuse." That's what your life did. Not your words, your life. You didn't just say what was right, you embodied it. You became the living contrast between the life they were faking and the life they were running from. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever seen someone flinch at kindness, pull away from honesty, reject peace? That's not because they don't want those things. It's because those things make the noise inside of them too loud to ignore. You were not a threat to their safety. You were a threat to their self-deception. And instead of healing, they chose hostility. Consider the story of Stephen in Acts 7. He stood in truth, filled with the Holy Spirit, and declared what was real. He didn't attack anyone, but when the truth pierced their hearts, they gnashed their teeth at him and stoned him to death. Why? Because his spirit reflected a light too honest for their pride to accept. You've felt that same rejection, haven't you? Not for doing evil, but for daring to be pure in a polluted room. You were like fresh air in a sealed chamber, uninvited but necessary, and that freshness caused them to cough. Your discernment was like salt in a wound they refused to treat. You didn't mean to agitate their pain, but your healing exposed what they kept infected, and in their mind, the cure became the enemy. I'll tell you a story about an interior designer named Ezra, who was hired to renovate a historic home. When he began peeling back the wallpaper, he found mold eating through the foundation. But the homeowners didn't want to hear it. They accused him of lying, sabotaging, and making things worse, all because he told the truth about what was already there. That's what happened with you. They didn't hate the light. They hated what the light revealed. Ephesians 5:13 says, "But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light." That verse lives in you. You carry a light that not only reveals darkness, it has the power to transform it. But only if the darkness is willing to yield. Many aren't. And so, rather than look inward, they lashed outward. The insults, the gossip, the stonewalling, the passive aggression, it wasn't personal. It was a last-ditch effort to destroy the mirror you became. If they could get you to question yourself, to dim your brightness, to join their masquerade, then they wouldn't have to change. Isn't it easier to silence the alarm than to wake up? But here's the miracle. You didn't shatter. While they drowned in projection, you stood firm in peace. While they reacted in panic, you responded with clarity. While they descended into accusation, you chose alignment. You became what they feared. A consistent reminder that it's possible to live free without needing applause, masks, or manipulation. You didn't fight them with fists. You fought them by staying pure. And in a world that glorifies filters, edits, and curated perfection, someone who shines with unfiltered truth is a threat. Why do you think their hate felt so personal, so intense, so relentless? Because it wasn't just anger. It was the resistance of their internal chaos, clashing with your divine order. I once knew a young seminarian named Olivia. She was quiet, deeply loving, and always honest. Her presence unsettled her mentors, not because she rebelled, but because she obeyed God more than she obeyed the politics of the institution. They tried to push her out, called her naive. Years later, she would lead a movement of spiritual renewal in churches that had grown cold. They had underestimated the power of purity, just like they did with you. Now you see clearly, their rage was never truly about you. It was the sound of their inner war exploding at the surface. And even now, though they may still deny it, your very existence continues to echo in their souls, like a quiet call back to truth. You survived not because you retaliated, but because you refused to become what they accused you of being. You stayed clean, you remained intact, and now you are stronger than ever, not because of what they did to you, but because of what you didn't let them take. What they called bullying was far more than cruelty. It was a spiritual initiation cloaked in rejection, isolation, and silence. On the surface it looked like exclusion, like mockery, like shame. But in the spirit realm, it was something far deeper. A divine ceremony meant to awaken the power within you that could not be birthed in comfort. The world may label it humiliation, but in heaven's courtroom, it was the beginning of your anointing. Think of how David was overlooked by his own father when the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king. There remains yet the youngest, Jesse said, but he is tending the sheep. 1 Samuel 16:11. Rejected by those closest, dismissed as irrelevant, and yet chosen by God. Like David, you weren't forgotten. You were hidden for a time, but rejection was never the end. It was the signal that your calling was too great for common company. And isn't that what makes your story so different? You didn't just face ridicule, you endured a spiritual trial that few can comprehend until they've walked through the fire themselves. The looks, the whispers, the abandonment. It wasn't just people being mean. It was the world's attempt to break what it secretly recognized as sacred. They tried to crush you not because you were weak, but because you were marked. You were set apart in a way they couldn't name, but their spirits could feel it. And what the spirit feels, the flesh often fears. Let me tell you about Eleni, a quiet artist in her 20s whose soft-spoken nature was often mistaken for passivity. In college, her peers mocked her for being too different, too silent, too spiritual. But what they didn't see was that her sketchbooks were filled with prophetic visions, art that would eventually be displayed in cathedrals across Europe. The bullying she endured in isolation was the very space that trained her spirit to hear God's whisper. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The Bible makes it clear, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven." Matthew 5:11-12. You didn't ask for the spotlight. You never volunteered for the public spectacle. But you were chosen for it. And being chosen doesn't always look like favor. It often looks like fire. What if your exclusion wasn't about being cast out, but about being called up? Like a lion raised among sheep, you were never meant to blend in. You were destined to lead. And when that destiny began to show, the world didn't know how to receive it. So they tried to erase it. They didn't see the nights you cried, the prayers you whispered when no one returned your calls, the days you walked through rooms where you were treated like you didn't exist. But heaven saw, and while the world tried to reduce you to a shadow, God was shaping you into a vessel of unshakable presence. You didn't stumble into greatness. You were forged for it. Every stone they threw became part of your foundation. And while they laughed, thinking they had pushed you down, all they did was press you deeper into purpose. Like Joseph in the pit before the palace, or Moses in the desert before the mountain, your wilderness was the place where God began to reveal your blueprint. I once knew a man named Harun. He was dismissed from his company for not fitting the culture. What they really meant was, he didn't compromise like the others. For a season he sank into obscurity, but it was in that solitude that he developed a small tech idea that would later disrupt an entire industry. They thought they silenced him, but they only gave him silence, and that silence became his sanctuary. Rejection hurts. There's no denying it. But could it be that this pain was not just a wound, but a weight that strengthened your spirit? You didn't just endure mockery. You emerged with clarity, compassion, and wisdom. You didn't become bitter. You became refined. Just like gold passes through the fire to be purified, you were placed in the crucible not to destroy you, but to separate your divine essence from the noise of the world. Nelson Mandela, one of history's most revered leaders, spent 27 years in prison, stripped of dignity, publicly shamed, and globally silenced. Yet it was in those years of forced isolation that his vision crystallized, and his inner authority was sharpened. When he was finally released, he walked not as a victim, but as a king in spirit. His rejection by society became his refining. His humiliation became his legacy. Romans 5:3-4 says, "We glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope." You didn't lose yourself in the process. You found the deeper version of who you were created to be. They tried to make you invisible, but your presence became undeniable. They tried to write you out, but your name is now written in places their envy can't reach. And what's more, you no longer crave the spaces that couldn't hold your greatness. You've discovered something priceless. Your throne wasn't in the crowd. It was in the quiet. It was never among the many. It was in your solitude that you met your sovereignty. You are no longer just someone who was rejected. You are someone who was revealed. Through the rejection, you didn't survive to remain silent. You were separated to rise. And now, the very rejection that once tried to crush you has become the fuel that ignites your reign. They called you crazy, not because you were wrong, but because you were too right. Your clarity disrupted their carefully engineered narratives. Your insight cut through the fog like a sword, and it scared them. And instead of facing the truth, they slapped a label on you, crazy. Not because they truly believed it, but because it was the easiest way to silence what they couldn't control. They didn't just call you emotional, paranoid, or delusional. They used those words like weapons, blunt instruments meant to discredit, isolate, and dismantle the credibility of your voice. But what if those very labels were actually confirmations? Proof that your discernment hit something too raw, too real, too revealing. The same tactics were used throughout history. Discredit the messenger so the message never gets heard. It's not new, it's ancient. Jesus himself was called mad by his own people. He is out of his mind, they said in Mark 3:21. Even the Son of God was dismissed by those closest to him because his presence disrupted the normal, the accepted, the convenient. You too became that holy disruption, and they couldn't take it. They called you paranoid because you saw the pattern before anyone else did. You noticed the timing of the betrayals, the way their smiles didn't match their words, the way the atmosphere shifted when truth got too close. They called you sensitive because your emotions didn't play by their script. But how could they? You were never meant to be numb to evil, dressed up as kindness. Consider the story of John Nash, the Nobel-winning mathematician portrayed in A Beautiful Mind. He was called delusional, institutionalized, and dismissed by many, but the world eventually caught up to what his mind had seen long before. His so-called madness carried brilliance the system couldn't understand at the time. You carry that same anointing, vision ahead of its generation. I once met a young woman named Karina who worked at a media company. She raised concerns about a toxic manipulation pattern unfolding behind the scenes. They laughed. They called her dramatic. Months later, a whistleblower confirmed everything she'd said. By then, she'd already left. But the truth followed. She wasn't delusional. She was discerning, just like you. Proverbs 28:5 says, "Evildoers do not understand what is right, but those who seek the Lord understand it fully." Your understanding was not mental instability, it was spiritual perception. And in a world allergic to truth, sanity that can't be sedated gets labeled as a threat. Their silence now screams louder than their accusations ever did. It's a silence soaked in fear, in shame, in the realization that your vision wasn't broken, it was simply unfiltered. The stillness they wrap around themselves isn't peace, it's paralysis. And deep down, they know it. They tried to make your sanity look like instability, but it was never you they feared. It was the mirror you held. Your very presence reminded them of what they tried to forget. And when they couldn't twist your truth, they tried to twist your mind. But the plan failed because you stayed anchored. While their lies cracked like thin ice beneath their feet, your spirit stood on solid rock. And now, you don't just carry clarity, you embody it. And that reflection still terrifies them. They thought your silence meant surrender. They mistook your composure for collapse. But what they never understood is that your silence wasn't weakness. It was the roar of wisdom, choosing not to waste energy on noise. You could have exposed them early. You could have defended yourself with fury. But you waited. You watched. You let truth mature in stillness, knowing that real power doesn't rush. It rises. You were like Nehemiah on the wall, focused on the greater work. When they tried to distract you, to drag you down into petty drama, you answered the way he did. I am doing a great work and cannot come down. Nehemiah 6:3. Your silence wasn't passive, it was prophetic. You were documenting everything they thought you missed. While they played their games, you played the long game. You let time become your ally. You let truth gather weight. And now it's surfacing, not through vengeance, but through vindication. Whispers are turning into confessions. Secrets are unraveling themselves. Their narrative is losing grip because truth doesn't sleep forever. Let me tell you about Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Shot by extremists for speaking out about education, she remained silent for weeks in recovery. But that silence wasn't defeat. It was brewing a global movement. When she finally spoke, the world listened. Her restraint became her resonance. Your story carries the same spiritual frequency. I'll also tell you about Jamal, a school principal who was ridiculed for not joining the politics of his district. He kept records, watched patterns, and said little. When a corruption scandal broke 3 years later, his quiet integrity made him the voice people trusted. They thought he was weak, but his wisdom outlasted their power. Isaiah 30:15 says, "In quietness and trust is your strength." That's what you walked in. You didn't rush to prove anything. You let time testify. And now, without lifting a finger, the scales are tipping. What was hidden is now exposed. What was whispered is being shouted. And what was called weakness has been revealed as unshakable wisdom. They underestimated you because you didn't strike back. They assumed silence meant submission, but you were never retreating. You were rising in silence. And now, the very truth they tried to bury is breaking through the surface, like roots tearing through concrete. You didn't fight for attention, you fought for alignment. And you've won, not with noise but with presence. Not with chaos, but with clarity. Because truth doesn't need a weapon, it is one. You didn't just walk through a humiliation ritual. You emerged carrying the blueprint to dismantle the very system that tried to erase you. What was done to you wasn't random, and it certainly wasn't mere cruelty. It was calculated. A programmed cycle designed to isolate, confuse, diminish, and then repackage itself as concern or reconciliation, once it believed you were weak enough to surrender. But you saw through it. You were never just a victim of their pattern. You became the pattern's unraveling. You began to notice how every so-called act of kindness had conditions, how each word of encouragement came only after you bowed your head, how concern was merely a mask for control. And instead of cracking, you studied, you observed, you decoded. Their illusion depended on silence, but your discernment became too sharp to be dulled. Your spirit, clear and clean, moved like light through their fog, and it made them uncomfortable because your survival meant exposure. You began to recognize what few ever do, that their version of love was a weapon, their loyalty a chain, and their support a leash. You weren't just meant to walk out of that system, you were meant to expose its blueprint so others could follow. How many others are still trapped in cycles that look like love but feel like prisons? Your clarity is the key that opens those cells. Isaiah 58:6 asks, "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke?" That's what your journey has become, not just personal healing, but prophetic deliverance. You are not merely a survivor, you are a liberator. Let me tell you about Harriet Tubman, a once enslaved woman who became a force of liberation for hundreds. She didn't just escape slavery, she returned again and again, decoding the roots, learning the rhythms of the system, and guiding others out. She said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." Her journey wasn't only about freedom, it was about awareness, just like yours. You didn't just walk out, you marked the exits so others wouldn't have to stay in the dark. I also knew of someone like Micah. He wasn't famous, just a quiet voice in a noisy office. When leadership tried to gaslight him after calling out unethical behavior, they tried to isolate him, mock him, question his mental state. But he kept notes, emails, dates, faces, and when the time came, the entire program collapsed, not because he fought loud, but because he fought smart. That's what you've done. You were never reckless, you were strategic. Every insult hurled at you, every public betrayal, every distorted narrative was not a chain, it was a test. And your endurance through that test sharpened your discernment into a weapon the system never saw coming. They underestimated the power of silence rooted in revelation. They mistook stillness for submission, not realizing you were building spiritual momentum. Romans 8:37 declares, "In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." You weren't just attacked, you overcame. And now the program that once thought it had control has been fractured, cracked open by your insight, your stillness, your spiritual resistance. Their tactics had a formula: isolate, confuse, humiliate, and offer false peace. You lived through it. You mapped its every move. And now that map is in your hands, not as a victim but as a master strategist. You're a living manual for escape, a blueprint of resilience that tells others, you're not crazy, you're being conditioned, but there's a way out. Joseph once stood humiliated in chains, sold by his own brothers. Yet in time he would say, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." To Genesis 50:20. That's the same power in your story. What was meant to shame you is now shaping generations. What was meant to silence you is now equipping the voiceless. The silence you kept wasn't defeat, it was divine. You were waiting for the truth to surface on its own terms. You didn't need to explode. You let the lies implode under their own weight. And now, as the truth rises and eyes begin to open, they realize you weren't the problem. You were the threat to manipulation, to cycles that feed on fear, to the illusion of power built on silence. You're not just a survivor, you are the blueprint. You are the torch carried through the darkest night, the voice rising after the silence, the map carved from pain turned into power. What they called weakness became your armor. What they called too emotional became your prophetic sensitivity. What they tried to destroy now shines through you like fireproof gold. You didn't just walk out, you broke the door off its hinges. And as you continue forward, know this: Your life is the proof that spiritual systems of control can be broken. Your journey is not just healing, it's a revolution. You didn't just survive the fire, you became the light that others now follow through the smoke. What was meant to silence you has only amplified your voice. What was designed to break you has become your breakthrough. You walk through the ritual of humiliation not as a casualty, but as a catalyst. And now, every step you take carries the weight of wisdom, the authority of survival, and the power of truth refined in fire. Remember this, your story is sacred. Your pain had a purpose, and your clarity is a calling. You saw through what others still can't name. You broke through what others are still trapped in. And because of that, you now carry not only your own freedom, but a divine responsibility to shine, to speak, to lead. There will be others who stumble in darkness thinking they're alone, but your story is the signal, your voice is the lamp, and your life is the evidence that God's chosen cannot be crushed. They rise. If this word pierced your spirit, if it felt like a mirror held up to your soul, I invite you to comment 777 below as a sign that your discernment is alive and your spirit is rising. To every chosen one who has supported this channel through super thanks, thank you. And if you didn't or couldn't give, please know this, your presence, your time and your heart here are already a gift. I thank you deeply, truly, for simply walking this journey with us. If this message spoke life to you, please like, subscribe, share it with someone who needs healing, and leave a comment testifying what part of this truth set you free. And now, as you walk forward from this moment, may the God who sees in secret reward you openly. May your discernment stay sharp, your peace stay deep, and your light stay unshakable. You are not broken. You are reborn. You are not just awake. You are anointed. Blessings, freedom, and fire upon your journey. The world hasn't seen the best of you yet, only the beginning. Chosen one, don't scroll. Something is happening in the spirit right now, and this message found you because it's not just information, it's confirmation. You've felt it, haven't you? The air around you has shifted. Conversations you're not even present for are unraveling. People who once laughed behind your back are now watching their lives bend under invisible pressure. But this isn't coincidence, it's consequence. They thought they were just gossiping, just pushing buttons, just throwing shade. But what they didn't know is you weren't just another name. You were marked, you were chosen, you were sealed by the Most High. And when someone touches what is sacred with filthy intent, the universe doesn't whisper, it roars. You didn't retaliate, you didn't expose, you didn't play the games. And yet somehow, every lie is crumbling. Every false story is reversing. Every hidden agenda is coming to light. Why? Because divine justice doesn't wear a watch, but it always shows up on time. And this time, it's not subtle. Karma isn't just arriving. She's dressed for war, heels on, receipts in hand. And those who tried to harm you? They're learning the hard way that heaven has perfect memory and infinite patience. So, type 777 in the comments. If you know this season has nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with alignment. And to every soul who supported this channel, whether through a like, a share, a word of encouragement or a super thanks, thank you. You're part of something holy here, and heaven sees your heart. You're not just watching a video, you're standing in the ripple of divine reckoning. But what if I told you this isn't just about them facing karma? It's about why they couldn't break you in the first place. Why did the smear campaigns fail? Why do your enemies seem confused by your peace? How did your silence become their downfall? And why is it that, despite everything they tried, you came out more radiant, more aligned, and more anointed than ever? Stick around, because we're diving into the spiritual mechanics behind karma's return, the protection wrapped around your name like fire, and the truth that made the universe stand still just to defend your honor. This isn't just a story of justice, it's a prophecy unfolding, and you're at the center of it. Let's begin. God's chosen ones, everyone involved is getting karma, wishing they had just left you alone. Number 1. They violated cosmic law and triggered their own collapse. You were never just a person passing through pain. You were an initiate, chosen not by popularity or power, but by the frequency of divine alignment. They didn't realize they were dealing with someone under sacred jurisdiction. When they schemed, mocked, manipulated, or tried to emotionally bleed you out, they thought they were playing with an easy target. But what if their attacks weren't random? What if their cruelty activated an ancient system of accountability they were never prepared to face? There are some souls on this earth who walk with frequencies not of this realm. You are one of them, carriers of ancestral fire, guardians of divine alignment. The Apostle Paul wrote in Galatians 6:7, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap." The sowing didn't start with you, but the reaping. Oh, it's theirs to carry now. Do you feel the shift? It's not revenge, it's restoration. It's heaven setting things straight. And have you ever watched someone betray you and then unravel from the inside out? And you knew, deep in your bones, that you didn't have to lift a finger. That's divine karma in motion. You weren't built for retaliation. You were built for revelation. Even your silence had teeth. That's what unnerved them. The calm after the lie, the peace after the betrayal. They could feel something ancient watching, even if they couldn't name it. You carry what David carried when Saul hurled spears at him. Not just resilience, but divine covering. Like David, you didn't retaliate. You waited. And while they danced in false victory, heaven started drawing the line. The moment they plotted against you, they entered a spiritual court they didn't believe in. They failed an exam they didn't study for. And now the laws of balance, the cosmic laws, are executing justice they never saw coming. Consider the artist Hilma af Klint, a visionary painter whose abstract spiritual works were misunderstood for decades. She once said, "The pictures were painted directly through me, without any preliminary drawings and with great force." People mocked her in life, ignored her power, but now her legacy outshines those who once dismissed her, just like you. Dismissed, misunderstood, but protected by something bigger. And I want to tell you about Emmanuel. Just months ago, he was the weak link in his office. His colleagues ridiculed him for his quiet nature, gossiping behind his back, excluding him from projects. But what they didn't know, he was fasting in silence, praying in parking lots, holding spiritual power in unseen places. One of those same co-workers just lost their job, and Emmanuel was offered a managerial position, not because he sought revenge, but because his alignment brought reward. And look at nature. Think of the deep-rooted oak tree. When storms come, weaker trees snap. But the oak, it bends, it absorbs, it anchors deeper. That's you. The winds of betrayal blew hard, but your roots were too ancient to break. You were never just a bystander. You were the test. And they were the ones being measured. What happens when people realize too late that the one they tried to destroy was the very one assigned to bless them? What if the enemy's cleverness was actually their blindness in disguise? What if your presence was the mirror that revealed the rot in their character? You were the disruption to their deception, the stillness they couldn't manipulate, the light that exposed their shadows. And now, the universe, heaven, and every unseen law is moving. Not for revenge, but for realignment. They should have left you alone. But now, karma has entered the room. and she's not walking out empty-handed. Number 2, they mistook divine restraint for weakness, and now they're facing what you withheld. They thought your silence was surrender, that your refusal to respond meant you had no fire, no edge, no strength, but they never stopped to wonder, what kind of power must it take to withhold retaliation when retaliation is deserved? What does it mean when someone has the chance to destroy but chooses instead to disappear? What they never understood was that your stillness wasn't weakness. It was sacred restraint, an invisible wall of divine mercy that stood between them and the judgment they were begging to provoke. You could have ruined their name with a word. You could have exposed every hidden lie, every betrayal, every mask they wore. But you didn't. Why? Because you weren't operating from ego. You were walking in alignment. Can you see now how God trained you in the way of kings and prophets? A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Proverbs 25:28. But you had walls built from discipline, from sacred discernment, from the knowledge that not every battle is yours to fight. You waited, and in your waiting you became more dangerous than they could comprehend. Do you remember when Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, thinking they had silenced the one with the dream? They thought they'd won, but the silence Joseph kept in the pit was not fear, it was preparation. And when they finally stood before him years later, in famine and desperation, they realized too late. They hadn't defeated him, they'd delayed their own reckoning. That's what you carried, chosen one. That same atmosphere of holy reversal. When actor and humanitarian Chadwick Boseman quietly battled terminal illness while still pouring himself into roles that inspired millions the world didn't know, his silence was not weakness, it was dignity, it was divine timing. Now, those who once doubted his impact look back in reverence, realizing the true weight of the stillness he walked in. You were like that. People around you mocked your stillness. They saw your refusal to retaliate as a free pass to push you further. But every time you walked away instead of lashing out, you were actually standing in the gap, delaying judgment, offering mercy, holding space, not for their sake, but because your spirit refused to get dirty in the trenches of their drama. And let me tell you about Clarice, a teacher in her mid-30s who was falsely accused of favoritism by jealous colleagues. The rumors spread like wildfire. She could have fought back, exposed their own misconduct. But she didn't. Instead, she transferred schools. 3 months later, 2 of her accusers were under review for unrelated ethical violations. Clarice, she's now assistant principal, elevated, vindicated, untouched. That's the thing. You weren't a victim. You were the pause, the invisible line, the sacred breath between cause and effect. What they saw as passivity was actually the restraint of a soul fully aware of its power. You didn't step away because you couldn't fight. You stepped away because your presence was protecting them from what could have been. Think of the ocean before a tsunami. Calm, quiet, the water retreats, and people misread that stillness as safety, not realizing it is the prelude to a force they cannot outrun. You were that ocean, that silence, that power waiting in grace. Now that you've moved out of the way, the forces you held back are being unleashed, and suddenly their boldness is gone, their confidence crumbles, the laughter fades, because the truth is hitting like thunder. You weren't quiet out of fear, you were quiet out of divine authority. They thought they won because you didn't strike back, but now they realize they were spared only because you stood in the gap. And what do people do when mercy walks away? What happens when the storm they kept provoking finally arrives? Can they stand in the truth they once mocked? This is not vengeance. This is divine realignment. It's not punishment. It's prophecy fulfilled. Number 3. They tried to steal what was sacred and triggered a divine audit. This wasn't just betrayal, it was spiritual trespass. They didn't simply hurt your feelings or waste your time. They attempted to tap into what was never theirs to access. They committed the most dangerous kind of theft. They tried to steal your spiritual identity. And when someone tampers with a soul chosen and sealed by divine authority, the consequences are not only immediate, they are personal to the heavens. What happens when someone tries to counterfeit the very thing heaven handcrafted in you? What kind of blindness does it take to believe they could imitate the anointing without inheriting the responsibility? The book of Acts tells us about the sons of Sceva, men who tried to use the name of Jesus without having the authority or relationship behind it. Jesus I know, and Paul I know about, but who are you? Acts 19:15. They thought power could be mimicked. The evil spirit attacked them, and they fled naked and wounded. That is spiritual theft's reality. It backfires in ways no one sees coming. You carry something encoded, something designed in the unseen. Your wisdom, your timing, your strength, your glow. It's not artificial. It's not taught. It's transferred through fire, obedience, and suffering. And that's exactly why they wanted it. Because they saw the light, but not the process that forged it. Singer and creative powerhouse Solange Knowles once said, "Do nothing without intention, so everything you do has to mean something, even your silence." While her sister may be more recognized globally, Solange's energy is unique, untouchable, deeply rooted. Many tried to duplicate her aesthetic, her vibe, but the truth is, only she could carry her own spiritual texture. That's what they missed about you. They thought they could take your voice, your gift, your influence, without enduring the crushing weight of your preparation. But when you're chosen, your calling is watermarked. Invisible to the world, undeniable to the spirit realm. And let's talk about Samuel, a 28-year-old barista who quietly led worship at his local church. A colleague befriended him, praised him, and began mimicking his spiritual language and gestures. Eventually, that colleague tried to take over the worship team, thinking he could copy Samuel's favor. Weeks later, his voice failed mid-service. Doctors found no medical reason, but spiritually, it was already explained. You don't have to lift a hand when you're aligned, because divine systems carry enforcement. Those who tried to manipulate your essence are now reaping sickness in their minds, breakdown in their finances, confusion in their path. They opened doors they weren't qualified to touch. Imagine a beehive. Only the queen produces the next generation. If another bee tries to impersonate her pheromones, the entire hive detects the fraud and eliminates the threat. It's not personal, it's nature protecting sacred order. That's what's happening around you. The energetic hive knows who's real. They didn't just want to be like you, they wanted to replace you, but they forgot no one can walk in shoes heaven hasn't fitted. You didn't curse them, you didn't even confront them. But spiritual laws did. What they tried to wear has turned to weight. The blessings they grabbed for are burning holes in their hands. Because when someone steals from the sacred, it's never just about theft, it's about triggering a response from divine justice. They're not losing randomly, they're being held accountable specifically. This isn't karma being general, this is karma being custom-tailored. Every false compliment they gave you, now met with silence. Every fake alliance, now unraveling in real time. They activated judgment by reaching for something holy with unclean hands. And now that audit has begun. It's not just a setback, it's a spiritual recalibration. Because when heaven watches you be copied, drained, and targeted, and you still choose peace, it responds. And its justice is not performative, it's surgical. Number 4, they tried to ruin you, but only exposed themselves. They thought your silence was vulnerability, that if they whispered loudly enough, crafted just the right narrative, and wrapped their insecurity in charisma, they could convince the world that your light was a lie. But what if the only thing they actually exposed was the shadow in their own heart? What if the smear campaign they launched became the mirror that shattered their own illusion? They weren't tearing down your reputation. They were burning their own reflection. The lies they crafted didn't stain your soul, they stained their own credibility. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, says Proverbs 26:27. And if someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. That's not just a verse, it's divine law in motion. You didn't have to defend yourself. You didn't have to assemble a team to clear your name. You stayed still, you stayed aligned, and while you kept your peace, heaven kept receipts. Their plan was strategic, malicious whispers to the right ears, false concern masking envy, and twisted truths delivered with just enough charm to seem believable. But the truth has a frequency of its own. And now, people are starting to tune in. They're replaying old conversations, revisiting things that once didn't make sense. Why did they speak so obsessively about you? Why did their story shift with every retelling? Why was there always drama around your name, but peace in your presence? Bishop T.D. Jakes, a global spiritual leader and author, once said, "Character is who you are when nobody's watching. Reputation is who people think you are. But God will defend both when you live in truth." And that's what you did. You lived in truth, and God took care of the rest. You were never fighting for public approval. You were fighting for inner alignment. And while they were busy putting on a performance, the stage lights shifted. Now the spotlight is on their inconsistencies, their contradictions, their false humility laced with hidden agendas. Think of Mariana, a corporate strategist whose former manager tried to discredit her after she declined to participate in unethical practices. He spread half-truths about her lack of loyalty, attempting to sway the team against her. Months later, not only was his behavior exposed through internal audits, but Mariana was recruited by a competing firm at double the pay and with full creative freedom. She didn't clap back. She just kept working, kept building, kept believing. And that decision created the space for the lie to decay on its own. Even in nature, you see this truth. Like volcanic ash attempting to bury a tree, only to later nourish the soil and cause that very tree to grow stronger and taller than before. That's you. They tried to bury your essence with distortion, but all they did was create the conditions for your growth. And now, your roots run deeper than their rumors ever could. The energy they weaponized against you is now circling back. Their story no longer sells. The audience they gathered to mock you, they're leaving. Their mask is slipping. Their jokes fall flat. Their energy is tired. And yours? It's grounded, alive, untouched. Can you feel it? The reversal, the shifting winds of justice. Isn't it strange how the people who tried to ruin your image now tremble in the image of who they've become? Isn't it revealing how truth rises, even when buried beneath piles of lies? You never had to stain your hands to clear your name. You just had to stand still long enough for the storm to reveal where the rot was really hiding. And now, as everything unravels, you're still standing, clear, covered, vindicated. Number 5. They thought they broke you, but they activated a code they weren't meant to touch. They thought the betrayal would be your ending, that you'd curl inward, vanish into silence, or lose yourself in the very chaos they engineered. But what if their cruelty didn't finish you? It unlocked you. What if the pain they inflicted didn't close the door on your destiny, but flung it wide open? When the world cracked your heart, it wasn't destruction, it was divine access. That heartbreak, it was a key. That rejection, a portal. They didn't just cause wounds, they accidentally activated a sacred code embedded in your soul long before you ever breathed your first breath. As it is written in Romans 8:18, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. That glory? It's what they didn't see coming. Your spiritual DNA began to reawaken, not from textbooks, not from teachers, but from tears, from silence, from the sacred echoes of your own suffering. You weren't falling apart, you were falling open, into memory, into knowing, into power. You began remembering who you were, not just before the pain, but before the world even began measuring you by its false scales. The same suffering they believed would break you began to reintroduce you to your original design. Can you feel how different you are now? Have you noticed how you see through masks with ease? How your words carry weight that makes liars tremble and the humble lean in? That's not arrogance. That's what happens when heaven's frequency overrides earthly programming. The prophet Elijah once sat beneath a tree, broken and pleading for death, thinking his assignment was over. But instead of dying, he was fed by an angel, given new vision, and sent back stronger than ever. 1 Kings 19:4-8. That's what happened to you. You didn't expire, you recalibrated. And that's what they never anticipated. You rising, you becoming sharper, you speaking in a voice they don't recognize anymore, because you're no longer the wounded version of yourself. They are now face to face with your higher self. And the truth is, they don't have a strategy for this version of you. They never expected you to come back wiser, faster, more aligned. Now they're not just confused, they're unnerved. Poet and author Rupi Kaur once said, "What is stronger than the human heart which shatters over and over and still lives?" You proved it, not by avoiding pain, but by surviving it and becoming something stronger because of it. Consider Diego, a quiet medical resident who was wrongfully blamed for a medication error during his first year. His supervisors withdrew support. His peers began to whisper, most would have quit. But Diego took every silent night, every tear-stained morning, and poured it into discipline. 3 years later, he not only cleared his name, but became head of the hospital's ethics board. He didn't just survive the betrayal, he transfigured through it. You too began to move with precision. Every closed door, every sleepless night was heaven's hammer, forging you into something unbreakable. Like obsidian formed under fire, your power didn't just surface, it was forged. Even in the wild, we see this in the molting of snakes. The shedding isn't beautiful, it looks painful, even grotesque. But once it's done, the snake moves freer, clearer, dead skin behind it. That was you. They thought they were killing you. But you were just molting. Now you walk differently, speak differently. There's light in your eyes that wasn't there before, and they feel it. They don't understand it, but they feel it. And what haunts them most is not that you survived, but that you've remembered who you are. And nothing is more terrifying to the ones who tried to diminish you than the full emergence of the one they never thought would rise. Number 6. Their karma isn't bad luck. It's the invoice for violating the sacred. What they're going through isn't just a coincidence. It's not a string of bad luck or an unfortunate season. It's a reckoning, an exacting consequence issued by the divine ledger. The breakdowns, the collapses, the confusion, they're not random. They're not even unfair. They are the echo of a spiritual contract they violated without permission. And now the invoice has arrived, itemized and non-negotiable. You weren't just another person they could manipulate. You were marked, set apart, protected. But because you didn't wear your anointing like a crown, they assumed you were common. Because you gave chances, they assumed you were weak. Because you forgave, they assumed there was no consequence. But what if every act of grace was a divine delay, not a dismissal? What if heaven was simply giving them space to self-correct before judgment stepped in? This is what Psalm 105 verse 15 warns. Do not touch my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. But they did harm. They lied, manipulated, drained. And they did it not just to a person, but to a soul under divine contract. That changes everything. You were the healing presence, the truth bearer, the mirror that reflected back what they tried to hide. People like you carry disruptive light, not the kind that seeks applause, but the kind that exposes falsehood and dismantles illusion. That's why they pushed so hard, because your mere existence unsettled their lies. And now, karma isn't just knocking, it's collecting. The sleepless nights, the financial spirals, the relationships crumbling without clear cause, the rising panic they can't explain. It's not bad vibes, it's spiritual accountability. Their soul is remembering every debt it denied owing. Malcolm X once said, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today," but they spent their present violating what was sacred, assuming the future wouldn't remember. But the future remembers. God's justice doesn't move on emotion, it moves on alignment. And when they crossed you, they stepped out of alignment with divine order. Consider Elodie, a youth counselor known for her quiet discernment and deep compassion. Her manager, threatened by her influence with the teens, began sowing distrust, implying she was manipulative, unprofessional. For months, Elodie said nothing. She simply withdrew. Within weeks, parents began requesting her by name. The manager was later dismissed for a separate ethical violation. Elodie, promoted, empowered, and now mentoring a new generation of leaders. She didn't fight, she didn't retaliate. She simply removed herself, and heaven handled the rest. Think of the moment when a forest loses its canopy. The leaves once shielding the undergrowth are suddenly gone, and the sunlight floods in. Everything once hidden becomes visible. That's what happened when you walked away. Your presence was protection, even if they didn't recognize it. And now that you've stepped back, the raw consequences are exposed. The divine canopy has lifted. Can they feel it now? That sinking sensation, that invisible hand once guarding them from themselves, now gone. And what do you do when what protected you was the very soul you mistreated? Their collapse isn't tragic, it's truthful. Their unraveling isn't sudden, it's cumulative. Every moment they mocked your sensitivity, twisted your kindness, or weaponized your loyalty, recorded, remembered, and now repaid. Not by you, but by the God who kept count when you kept quiet. You never had to curse them, you only had to exit. And the moment you did, the divine system they ignored began to move. The silence they once used against you, now deafening in their own mind. The shadows they cast, now rising over their own doorstep. It's not misfortune, it's measurement. Not punishment, it's precision. Because when someone violates a sacred being, the debt always comes due. And this time, there are no extensions. No distractions strong enough, no affirmations loud enough, just the echo of justice that never forgets. Number 7, they laughed at your fall. Now they tremble at your rise. They turned your darkest moments into their entertainment. When you lost, they smirked. When you cried, they whispered. When you were silent, they screamed with glee. In your suffering, they found a sick kind of relief because it made them feel superior. But what if their laughter was never harmless? What if their mockery wasn't just mean? It was prophetic documentation. They weren't just watching a fall. They were witnessing a divine repositioning, and they had no idea. You were never falling. You were being restructured. As Isaiah 60:15 says, "Though you have been forsaken and hated, I will make you the everlasting pride and the joy of all generations." And now the shift has arrived. You are rising, not in secret, but in full view. What changed? Not your value, only your visibility. What they thought was your ending was the pruning of your path. You were being carved into something rare, and now that rarity is undeniable. Do you feel it? The doors opening without effort? The favor falling without explanation? The peace flowing like a river where there used to be drought? And they feel it too, but differently. Their stomachs twist, their voices quiet, their eyes avoid your presence, not because you're arrogant, but because you're proof. Proof